So Russell Brand went on Bill Maher's podcast, Club Random, and they had an interesting back and forth here, which I'm about to show you, on the issue of capitalism. I really think Maher sort of, the mask slips a little bit here, as you're going to see. And his commentary is sort of just irredeemably tainted by his own experience as a uber wealthy dude. Okay, so let's watch and then we'll break it down.
Over my lucky little life. But I also believe that I read a good book by a man called Mark Fisher, God rest his soul, though he was an atheist and wouldn't thank me for saying that. He wrote a book called Capitalist Realism. He said that he believes that the great triumph of capitalism has been that we can no longer envisage a system beyond it. He said, famously, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. People aren't even...
Let me just pause to react to that for a second. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. That the triumph of capitalism is that people just can't imagine not having capitalism, right? That it's just like, we feel like this is just the natural order of the world. This is the natural state of things. Now, what history shows us is that is definitely not true. This is not the natural state of the world. This is not the natural order of things. There are decisions that are made that get us here. There are laws that get us here. There are certain, philosophical fundamentals that we've implemented that got us here. And all these, not all these things, but probably most of these things are subject to change and subject to evolution. But that's a great point that, yes, the triumph of capitalism is people have a hard time imagining life beyond capitalism as if there's any other option, right?
Willing to imagine that there's a possibility of divorcing corporate and state interests.
Because capitalism works.
I'm not talking about...
I would love for him to expound on that. I would love... Now, he's going to try, but not really do it well. But, like, I'd love for him to go off about that more. Work how? What's your definition there? Like, what do you mean? How has it, quote-unquote, worked? How has it worked? As in, like, maybe the argument would be, well, it's better than feudalism. It's better than absolute monarchies. Okay, but granted, but does that mean that we're at the end point? It's this end of history analysis, right? Like, we've already come to, this is the end point. It's going to be like this in perpetuity now. Like, we figured it all out, we've hit this point, and now we're stagnant, and we just continue doing what we're doing. That's not how it works. That's not how it works.
Aren't even willing to imagine that there's a possibility of divorcing corporate and state interests.
Because capitalism works.
I'm not talking
for
about
a great deal of people. That's why it's popular.
It's working less and less, though.
The same way, like, stereo became popular. Like, we could have stuck with mono, but we were like, you know what? This is actually better. It kind of works. Does it lose something? I guess that's why they keep putting albums back out in mono. And I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you just put them back on 78s, for fuck's sake? Why are we going backwards? Or the kids, they like vinyl. Like, I have my old vinyl. It's like, please. Enjoy listening to shitty sounding records that are scratchy.
I would say, in a way, people are on the streets. People have been on the streets, not in enormous numbers, protesting for an end to current conflicts. The Black Lives Matter protests, and obviously the movements around Donald Trump, and the movements around Musk, and the trucker protests, and all of the agricultural...
Occupy Wall Street is probably the best example.
Protests in Germany and Sri Lanka and Holland, all around the world, people are protesting.
Do you know a lot of people who have been at protests or in the streets? Because I don't know anybody.
Well, I mean, Bill, he's telling on himself, man, and he doesn't realize it, bless his heart. He doesn't realize it. I don't know anybody who protests. This is going to get worse, by the way. He's going to keep going down this train of thought, and watch where it ends up.
It's like, it's just like people were sympathetic. Maybe it's because I'm older and people my age don't go out and do anything, let alone go.
And people with your amount of money in your circles, maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe just a little bit.
Fucking street. I don't go to a restaurant.
Even that too much bother.
It's amazing how ageist this country is.
But what I mean to say is that there are significant protest movements, but I think what there is a clear lack of a real vision that probably since Clinton and Blair onwards, no one is suggesting anything other than the management of decline, kind of intimate bureaucracies where we biometrically measure and manage our own health. No one's saying we could do something fantastic with America. Rhetorically, of course, great claims are made by either side, but no one's suggesting that we could reorganize society. No one's anticipating what the AI revolution is about to behold, the loss of jobs, the despair, the despondency, and that is likely to engender. And we were sort of seeing a return to feudalism. Yeah, in that beautiful film, The House I Live In, the great writer of that show, The Wire, said, when it comes to the opioid crisis and the addiction crisis in your country, he said, well, why don't we just admit that in a post-manufacturing America, we've got no need for 20% of the population. They're redundant now. They're defunct. We can lose them. And sometimes I think it comes down to simple demographics, that this nation can carry a good many deeply dissatisfied and unhappy people. And by God, it looks like it is. Because this ain't nothing, all of this conflagration that's going on in this country. Mostly it's seemingly housed around the culture war, where I think they're quite happy for people to quibble and quarrel and roar, because ultimately that doesn't affect the interests of the kind of the elite establishment interest that I'm interested in addressing, and that Bernie has tried to address. And I would offer you this, because it seems as during the conversations that I have had with some like former Democrat Party presidential candidates, that party almost consciously, deliberately, and explicitly decided they would rather have Trump win than win themselves with Bernie. I'd like to put that to you, because that, for me, if that is true,
I will answer that, but I will answer it first in this way. Can I just take this conversation, same topic, but a little more toward the pedestrian diurnal? I mean, I know you intellectuals, you know...
What do you mean, you intellectuals? I just told you I'm from the New Jersey of England.
I know, but
I may be sipping kombucha.
You do think like an intellectual. I mean, it's because that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, let's go to daily life and see if daily life matches with your theory of life. Because, like, as you go through your day, now maybe I live in a charmed world.
Of course you do. Of course I do.
I don't think I live in such a charmed world where I go to an office, you know, I see people who work, they're not all like making giant salaries. One person at that show is, I'm not going to say who. But this HBO is very generous. It's a good job, but it's just a job. We all do it. I'm the same as them. Like, oh, there are days like, oh God, I don't want to, I'm tired of it, but I got to keep working, and we all do our best. And I don't think they're unhappy. And then if I go out and get coffee somewhere and, you know, even a waiter, or like even the guy who's like the valet guy, they don't seem miserable. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna. They like, you know, they're living their life. Like when I was in my 20s, I was poor. I got it. Like, you know, I'm working my way up, and there is opportunity, and there's stumbles along the way, and there's lots of problems, and we should keep working on them. But it's like, I don't know if it's gonna get better by being massively rewriting human nature, which is impossible, or the way the world is constructed. I think people are selfish. I think you have to always factor that in. Anytime you're developing any kind of economic system, people are selfish, and they will go toward what makes their life better. Hopefully not at the cost of somebody too much, but sometimes, you know.
You believe in enlightened self-interest.
Oh boy, that was something. He's like, you know, when I talk to the waiter, or I talk to the valet, you know, people are fine. They're doing okay. They're living their life. It's like, dude, you live in a very wealthy place. You work a very lucrative job, and you're around some people who are just, you know, doing well financially. But then, like, when you interact with working class people, what, you think like the valet doesn't have money struggles? You think that, you know, you could tell by like just a simple interaction where you do platitudes and niceties that like, hey, everything's fine. Everything's working okay. I mean, I'm sure you could go back to the days of like absolute monarchies and make a similar argument. Hey, I don't see what the problem is. You know, I went down to the merchant at the corner and I got something from him, and he seemed really happy. And then, you know, I walked over here, and like, it's just a really dumb analysis from purposefully within his little bubble. Because to Russell Brand's point, when you look at the numbers on this stuff, I mean, geez, deindustrialization and these trade deals, which just outsource so many jobs, have decimated so many communities in this country. The deaths of despair, which he alluded to, right? The rise in addiction, 100,000 overdoses a year. Depending on what poll you look at, anywhere from 60% to 80% of the country living paycheck to paycheck. The 45,000 people who die every year because they don't have basic health care. You know, the destruction of unions in this country has left it so that our people are slipping out of our middle class. The colossal amounts of income and wealth inequality. I mean, that is a crisis. When you have 600,000 homeless people, but one person, Jeff Bezos, has $100 billion, seems like there's a bit of a problem there. Seems like at the very least we need to do redistribution of wealth and shore up our social safety net and all these different things. And all you get from Maher is this sort of terrible defense of capitalism from a personal life perspective. And then he does his whole like, well, you know, it's about human nature. And it's like, I don't think he really even understands other options, right? Like, if you ask Bill Maher, define social democracy, you think he can define that? I don't know. If you ask him to talk about, you know, just democratizing the workplace, right? Like worker-owned co-ops, where sort of like the companies function in a more democratic way. There's nothing that's like particularly radical or extreme or pie in the sky about that. But does he realize that that's like an alternative to capitalism? Right? Like there's a million ways you can construct a system. You could have state-owned enterprises, you could have worker-owned co-ops, you can have hybrid type systems. And it just seems like he's defending the status quo by default, despite all of the evidence to the contrary that what we're doing right now is not working and it's devastating. I mean, look, the best example is what just happened with the Silicon Valley bank failure. I mean, immediately the FDIC rushed in and bailed them out. Then the Fed stepped in and bailed them out because these are elites who were suffering for a 2-second time span. And then you compare that to, like, for example, the 500,000 medical bankruptcies we have in this country every year, which is the #1 cause of bankruptcy. And nobody rushed in and said, oh my God, we got to bail you. This is crazy. 500,000 of our fellow citizens are going bankrupt because they got sick. That is crazy. We need to bail these people out right now. Nobody says it. Nobody says it. So to say, like, this system is working, how? In what sense is it working? In what sense is it working? There's massive bubbles of civil unrest popping up here and there, colossal economic disparity, a tremendous amount of pain. And to think that this is, like, as good as we could do with some tweaks, it's just super naive. It's just super naive. Man, this guy supported Bernie in 2016. And you could tell when he switched to Amy Klobuchar in 2020, it became pretty clear that, like, oh, okay, this is not the same guy. Let's see if they say anything else.
But also, I don't figure you for a misanthrope. I don't feel that at the heart of your beliefs is people are bad. Because at the core of my...
He actually does kind of believe that. That is one of the Bill Maher things. He's, you know, people are stupid. That's his thing. I wouldn't know if he'd say bad, but he'd say stupid.
Ideology is not even a begrudging, but an optimistic love of humanity. And my belief, Bill, is that if we enshrine, elevate, celebrate, and possibly even legislate the higher principles about nature, compassion, kindness, service, unity, a willingness to sacrifice, and this is where it does get personal, because I have to ask myself, what are you willing to give up, Russell Brand, in order to live in a fairer world? And I'm not just talking about taxation, because, by the way, affluent, like, sort of, you know, millionaire entertainers ain't the issue. We're talking about billionaire offshore corporations with unprecedented power that make the Carnegies and the Rockefellers look like sort of quaint little guys with Jackson dimes.
No, but I feel, my guess is that you live a very nice life, and my opinion of that is you should. You're talented, you worked your way up, but you can't, like, enjoy it without having some, I think, inappropriate guilt. Or, like, it shouldn't be this way. The world is only what it is. We're always...
That is a fundamentally conservative viewpoint, right? And I wouldn't call it guilt. It's just that Russell Brand is looking at the system and saying, this doesn't make sense and we should change it for justice. You know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know him. Maybe he does have some semblance of guilt, but you don't have to be guilty. You should just want to make the system better.
Trying to better it, but there's, you know, just enjoy. And no, you shouldn't trade places with someone who's, like, not doing well. We should...
All right. By the way, at the beginning of the podcast, they have this, like, sort of debate on hedonism. Because Russell Brand lived the rock star lifestyle, and there were drugs, and there were women, and Maher, like, sort of looks up to that as a kind of ideal. Like, you know, that's the way to live, that's the way to be. And Russell Brand is like, dude, when I was deep in that lifestyle, I was the most miserable I've ever been. And he explains how it's like, it's a vapid pursuit, it's a hollow pursuit, there's no meaning in that, there's no purpose in that. And Maher is just sort of apoplectic about that and can't wrap his mind around the notion that perhaps these are useless endeavors that are trying to fill an empty void. And it's just, it's sort of like watching, like, a 14-year-old boy debate a grown man who has life experience, you know? And ironically, the ages are flipped here. Russell Brand is younger, Bill Maher is older, but Maher played the role of the 14-year-old boy who's like, bro, boobs and weed, bro, woo! And Russell Brand's like, yeah, you know, I've smoked the weed, I've done other drugs, I've grabbed the titties, and, you know, at the end of the day, I really wasn't all that happy. So maybe that's not the answer. So, yeah. Anyway, interesting back and forth. Interesting podcast, but man, Maher, it really does seem like he's changed in that he used to much more aggressively advocate for better positions, whether it's anti-war positions, whether it's redistribution of wealth, universal health care. And then now it's almost like he's proud of the bubble that he's in, you know? So there you have it. All right, guys, that's the show. I love y'all very much. Thanks, as always, for listening. Deeply appreciate it. Everybody, do me a big favor. Click the like button. Click the subscribe button. Now we're going to try to get to 2 million subs. By the way, is there another plaque for like 10 million or something? There might be. Let's get to 10 million. Let's get it to 10 million. Let's do that. That would be amazing. So anyway, click that subscribe button. Also click the bell icon so you get a notification every time a video drops. Remember, you can always listen to the full audio podcast over on Spotify. We post them there every time there's a show. And much love to all the Patreon supporters of this show. You guys make it work. So if you can, please consider donating $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever. And you can do it in Patreon in the video description box below. Yeah, I'm proud of the fact that I've never talked to an advertiser, and that's how we're able to do that. So anyway, I love all you guys. Thanks as always for listening. By the way, this week we have on Crystal, Kyle and Friends, we're going to have an expert on the Trump legal case, so definitely check that out. And you can support that show on Substack. That link is in the video description box below. And by the way, you can always listen for free to that as well, just the full audio version that drops on Saturdays. All right, I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Everybody have a great rest of your day. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.